This is one of the series of postgraduate dissertation or research project checklist. And this is the second checklist on literature review chapter. And I am Dr. Xiangping Suzy Du. Literature review is normally the second chapter of a dissertation or research project. It normally starts with an introduction, outlining the main context of the literature, and sets the roadmap of this chapter. The main body of the literature review is in line with the main research objectives. People normally organize the main body in line with the objective 1, 2, and 3 and the key academic concepts. And it normally ends with a summary section. This chapter normally takes 20 to 30% of the overall word count. Why do you have to review literature for a dissertation or research project? This is because a literature review is to show how related work in the field has shaped and influenced your own research. It helps you to identify appropriate and relevant academic and professional literature and describe and summarize the main themes, where you can analyze the connections and contradictions between them, and synthesize all the relevant views to help you to form critical evaluation, where you can evaluate their usefulness or relevance and justify where you position yourself throughout the evaluation. And it is also where you show independent thoughts or original ideas of your own. It is your opportunity now to engage in a written dialogue with the scholars, researchers, practitioners throughout the literature, who is showing that you have viewed the relevant literature, understood them, and responded to the relevant body of the literature that underpins your research. And you indicated where you position yourself among the literature. Literature review content, or the body of knowledge in the literature review, differs based on your main research subject field. However, regardless of your main research subject, either in marketing or HR or strategy, the marking criteria remain the same for postgraduate students. So the most updated PG dissertation handbook suggests in the literature review for an outstanding standard, so students should be able to provide a comprehensive, wide-ranging, and in-depth literature review and demonstrate a far-reaching understanding of the key theoretical concepts, and engage in a critically informed debate of the literature, and demonstrate a superior ability to evaluate contrasting viewpoints with a very high degree of independent thoughts. So the mark sheet used by the supervisor has been divided into 4 sections. First is in the identification of the appropriate and relevant literature. Second is the literature employed, how they are applied in the context of your research. A third is about critical assessment or review, where they have evaluated them and looked in the contrasting viewpoints. And finally, the 4th point is the independence of thoughts or ideas. Now, let's look into the literature review checklist against the marking criteria and the sections in the mark sheet. First is the identification of appropriate or relevant literature. You need to ensure you can answer yes to the following questions. Is your literature comprehensive, wide-ranging, and in-depth against the marking criteria? So, for example, have you included at least 2 references or sources in each of the paragraph? And are there in total more than 30 references from different sources in this chapter? And is your literature from a variety of different credible sources, not only from books, but also include journal articles or industry report, so to cover that the viewpoints from scholars, researchers, practitioners. Is the literature included or relevant to your research topic and helps you to achieve your research objectives? It's not merely you just for the purpose of including the literature or sources. And have you included and explained the key theoretical concepts that are relevant to your research? For example, the key theoretical concepts related to your research objectives. So you don't assume that everybody or every reader understands it. So you have to assume your readers know nothing about the research topic and subject. After having identified relevant, wide-ranging and comprehensive literature, now you need to check that you have employed the literature in the context of your research, critically reviewed them, and demonstrated your independent thoughts. So for example, have you showed your understanding of the literature, not merely quoted or described by putting a reference there? Say Smith 2020 suggests. So what? Yeah? Have you applied the literature in the context of your research? So have you employed the literature? So for example, you may provide a few definitions of a concept, but you may have to explain later to say in the context of this research, this concept is referred as what? So this is where you apply this concept in your research and explain how it is used in your research. And also, have you compared and contrasted the different literature by using the relevant linking terms? Yeah, so if for relevant views, you may use similarly, likewise, what is more. But for contradicting views, you may use however, nonetheless, on the other hand. So using this signpost to indicate you have compared, contrasted them. And have you made any comments on the literature that you have referred or quoted? And have you showed your independent thoughts on any of the points you're making? So for example, you may use the terms like, this means, or that indicates, or as discussed above, it appears that, while applying in the context of your research. So far, we have discussed the literature review checklist based on the marking criteria and the sections on the mark sheet. Now let's summarize the checklist against the content of a literature review. So first, in the introduction section of the chapter, have you made the points clear? That means, have you indicated the key literature that is going to be reviewed in this chapter? And have you covered some of the research objectives or the key theoretical concepts as your main points? And have you clearly explained the points or defined the key theoretical concepts? And have you explained how this concept is going to be employed in this research? And have you offered support or evidence for each of the points you're making? And have you supported these points with enough relevant, updated, and credible sources and examples or evidence? So for example, you may see promotion helps with sales. So who said that? Is there an example that supports your points? Yeah, and then have you presented a balanced and fair argument, which means have you included any critical review and provided critical evaluation on these points? For example, is everybody, all the scholars agree to the point promotion helps with sales? Is this point based on a particular context or a particular product line or during a particular period of time or in a particular region? So when you present different views, that would be however, nonetheless, so some other people might suggest otherwise. Yeah? And have you presented the argument in a logical order? And it's always interesting for tutors to say students present them in a not logical order, in a wrong chronological order. You may say, Smith 2019 suggests something, the most updated view. And you see, however, Scott 2009 argues. Yeah, so you see the logic. And finally, in the summary section of the chapter, have you indicated the impact of the literature on your research? Yeah, and highlighting the purpose of your research and how does the literature has shaped your main research and what is the purpose of the research. In the next recording, we are going to discuss the checklist on literature review structure against the marking criteria of a postgraduate dissertation or research project. Literature review chapter can be the most challenging chapter that you may find. Yes, indeed. Working with literature presented by other people is always challenging. So first, starting to identify the relevant, wide-ranging, comprehensive, credible, reliable, and updated sources is hard enough. And then you have to engage with the literature and then present critical review and evaluation and show your independent thoughts, and it is very different from some students' previous academic studies. And we all know it's challenging, but however, you've got the support. So your supervisor, if you don't know what that means, your supervisor put comments saying, no critical evaluation, you may ask, how, or can you give me an example? Yeah, so your module leader is the one who might be able to point you to the right direction. And for example, there are some resources they may have put on the module site, or they may direct you to the case website. And obviously the case website should not be very unfamiliar to you now, and you should always take your initiative to find the relevant resources from the case website to improve your literature review chapter and to help you with your critical evaluation. So I am Dr. Xiangping Susie Du, and if you have any doubts about the slides or what is presented in this presentation, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.